Ladies and gentlemen, the seminar will now begin.
I'm Syrian.
I'm Syrian.
I'm Syrian.
I am Syrian.
I'm Syrian.
I'm Syrian.
I am Syrian.
I am Syrian.
I am Syrian.
I'm Syrian. I'm Syrian. I'm Syrian. I'm Syrian.
I am Syrian.
What does Syria mean to you?
Syria means pride. It means safety, family, and dignity to me.
Syria to me is the world. It's actually the cradle of civilization. It's democracy and freedom.
Syria is my homeland, my childhood memories, and hopefully one day I can take my own children to see what a lovely place it is.
Syria means the world to me. I can never be without Syria. I can't see myself without Syria.
Syria is every breath I take.
It's devastating to know that the Syria I met 4 years ago and the Syria I fell in love with 4 years ago isn't the same Syria it is today.
It's my heritage, ancestry, bloodline, hope, faith, culture. It's freedom. It's a secular nation. It's my motherland.
It's my home. It's where I feel safe and alive.
Syria means to me my country, my home, my family, my land.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for taking the time to attend today's seminar. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past and present. Yesterday marked 3 years since the conflict in Syria first began. In the past 3 years, the world has witnessed atrocities never before seen. We have watched on in horror as innocent people, young and old, have been massacred. Children as well as religious figures have been beheaded. Women have been raped and tortured and subjected to prostitution, and thousands of Syrians have been kidnapped for ransom. There are those in the world today who would claim that the events in Syria began with the same innocent children from Daraa protesting against the government, that the Syrian government cracked down on a popular uprising, and that the people of Syria are fighting against a tyrant regime. From early on, it was evident that armed militias were out to escalate the events that were unfolding. Many innocent Syrians, pro-government or not, were injured or killed during some of the street protests. The opposition would blame Shabiha or ghosts for these attacks and attribute them to the government. Millions of Syrians would take to the streets in order to show their loyalty to the Syrian state and to each other. However, media reports would have you believe the opposite. A mass propaganda machine headed by the Qatar-owned Al Jazeera network began to distort the truth and portray the events with great bias. Social and independent media has exposed many of the lies that were told by Al Jazeera and retold by mainstream Western media. The Syrian government had called on many occasions for the opposition to come to the table. They offered new reforms along with timelines and amnesty to those that had not committed atrocities. Yet the opposition never came. Instead, they chose to escalate their military efforts. 3 years on, and it has become apparent to all involved that this was never a peaceful uprising. It has never been a popular uprising, and the majority of those who are fighting are foreigners. A revolution suggests progression, yet this so-called revolution for democracy and freedom has done nothing but set the country back 100 years. Since 2011, NATO-backed armed insurgents have systematically attacked the country's infrastructure. Buildings and whole towns have been demolished. Historic relics have been destroyed. More than 2/3 of Syria's public hospitals and health centres have been devastated. Churches, mosques and places of worship have been desecrated. Electric towers and gas pipelines have been blown up, and so much more. As a result of all this violence and the relentless armed invasion of civilian populations, innocent Syrians have suffered and have been forced to flee their home, resulting in over 500 million displaced Syrians inside of Syria and 3 million Syrian refugees situated in neighbouring countries, Jordan, Turkey and Lebanon. And the death toll ranges from between 130,000 and 146,000. This is an armed insurgency that has been funded by Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and it has been politically backed by the US and Israel and their Western allies, including the Australian government. Same Western governments that have spent billions of our taxpayers' dollars' money and risked the lives of our own brave soldiers, some who would pay the ultimate price in fighting the war on terror. And yet today they support the very same enemy in Syria. What was once a terrorist in the eyes of the West has become a freedom fighter on the plains of Syria. Al-Qaeda and affiliated groups like Jabhat al-Nusra now roam free in the country, reaping havoc, chaos, death and destruction everywhere they go. And women have suffered immensely. And it begs the question, if these extremists take over the country, what will become of women in Syria? What will become of their freedoms, of their rights? What will the status of women become in Syria? Ladies and gentlemen, the focus of the seminar tonight will be on the role of women in Syria, both before and during the crisis, how it has changed, and what hopes there are for the future. We have with us tonight 3 strong, intelligent and educated Australian Syrian women to discuss this tonight. I would now like to introduce our first speaker, an Australian-born Syrian who grew up in Syria. She will discuss the role of women in Syrian society before the conflict and what has become of their rights and freedoms. She recently travelled to Syria in December of last year and will touch on some of her experiences and encounters with Syrian women she met there. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled by her height. She may be teeny tiny in stature, but as we say in Syria, she's got a heart as big as the ocean, and especially for Syria. Please welcome Reem Sager.